Hi and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second day of Thinking Food Futures. I'm going to wait for a second for Ishin to get us on the screen. And I am actually going to change my own view so I can see myself. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here as part of the two-day symposium that we have organized, Thinking Food Futures, which I am the co-curator for, together with my dear colleague and friend, Ishin Ono, as well as our wonderful curatorial assistant, Shayna Yoshida. And on behalf of Residency Unlimited, we are very pleased to welcome you. This panel is meant as a somewhat of an informal conversation that we felt was very much needed. Because let's start with the basic facts. When we search, let's do a Google search and we look for what foods could be extinct because of climate change. And if I'll be very honest with everyone, until I started working on this subject, I had this kind of vague understanding of what this might mean. But to be honest, until I started working on it, that was just about it. So I was surprised to find out that coffee is at risk because of rising temperatures, because of intense droughts, and that lovely cup of coffee that I'm holding in my hand will probably not be available to me. Now, obviously, those kind of questions are not just about us, me, Livia Alexander as an individual, but it is about the planet that we all share and inhabit. Cocoa. We just had an earlier workshop on decolonizing cacao, is also under threat. Corn, beans, cherries, maple syrup, and the list goes on and on. We live in a world where 1 billion people go hungry. 1 billion people. That is a seventh of the world's population, which keeps on growing at a rapid speed. At the same time, a third of our food produced, 1.3 billion tons, is wasted every year. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we are facing personally and collectively is possibly this feeling of paralysis, of like, this is way too complex, it's too messed up, and I don't know what I can do about it. Is the fact that I'm taking my little plastic bag and putting it in recycling, is that really solving the problem? Or is it a problem that requires a systemic change altogether? And what I do as an individual is just like a small drop in a bucket. Now, like any other complex problem, the answer is most likely lies somewhere on the spectrum. It's everything and nothing. It is depending on what we're talking about, what we're thinking about. And the question is, so where do we begin if this question is indeed so big? How do I empower myself as an individual to know that I'm making the right choices for the future of my children? So to think through these questions of personal and collective responsibility, about the roadblocks and the systemic and personal changes that we need to think through. We have brought together a group of wonderful thinkers, activists, and policy advocates. So I want to start by introducing our speakers this afternoon. Andrew Bell is Assistant Professor of Environmental Studies at New York University, focusing on rural livelihoods decisions and natural resource management, including water. I'm presenting very short bios. There are full bios also on our website. So please, by all means, visit our wonderful website regardless, but you can also read more information about our speakers there. Ramón Cruz is president of the Sierra Club and has over 20 years of experience intersecting the fields of sustainability, environmental policy, urban planning, energy, and climate change. And Defne Koryürek is a woman, a mother, and an activist who lives, cooks, writes, and lectures to inspire the public in search of a dignified exit for humanity. I will be co-moderating this panel with Ishin Onol, who is my co-curator on this exhibition. We have worked on this together for quite a while, and I'm very grateful to have the honor of this friendship and trust. And Ishin is a member of the Center for the Study of Social Difference research group at Columbia University. She's a very accomplished curator, a writer, and an educator focusing on archives, oral histories, and social justice. And it's kind of weird to introduce myself, but I will do so very quickly. I am a curator and a writer, as well as an assistant professor of global visual cultures at Montclair State University. I have curated all kinds of stuff, and I will leave it at that. But I have been collaborating with Residency Unlimited over the past few years on this initiative that has been stemming from looking at the ways that artists play a very important role in addressing the big pressing questions of our time. And this project is a culmination of this initiative. So to go back to this panel, we want to, as we said, critically reflect on the choices that we and others make. And we wanted to start with a big question for you guys. And one is, we want to start with, first of all, we would be grateful if you could start by introducing yourself, just to contextualize for our audience members, where is it that you're coming from, what your work has been to date, because you have all been personally and professionally very invested in this field. And we want to ask you, what do you feel are the current tendencies that seem to suggest that collective behaviors and decisions towards change and this idea of a better future seem like a really great idea, those big changes, those big systemic changes that we're looking for, but in fact have potentially a worse impact on climate change and the availability of food. So I know it's a big question to start with, but let's begin. Let's dive right in. So Ramón, I can see you. Would you like to start? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yep. Hello. Well, thanks, Livia, for the invitation, no, to be part of this panel with great colleagues and collaborators. And yeah, well, as you said, for the audience, I'm Ramón Cruz. I use pronouns he, him, his. I'm originally from Boriquén, which is the Taino name for the island of Puerto Rico, and but speaking to you right now from a sunny and beautiful day in the occupied territory of the Canarsie people, otherwise known as Brooklyn in New York. And as you said, yeah, I'm the president of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club, for those of you who do not know, it's the largest and oldest environmental organization in the United States. No? We have been around for 128 years. We have almost 4 million members and supporters in different, in 64 chapters around the United States. So, and yeah, and my career, I guess, has been, you know, in the mostly, as you said, in the intersection of environmental policy and urban affairs. So, but ultimately, you know, I'm interested on how people live, how people can live more sustainable, how people can move each other and use energy more efficiently. etc. No, so all these things, of course, is very much to the topic. That we're going to be bouncing around today. But to go more in your question about current tendencies, I would I would say that something, especially in this summer, that starting with the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota, at least in the United States, and also it has spread around the U.S. There has been this summer of reckoning, no, and in terms of issues of systemic racism, and so I would say that when it comes to tendencies that may suggest collective behaviors and decisions for change, I think that at least speaking on for the Sierra Club, there has been this understanding or this trend that we have been that has been going on for a few years in terms of centering equity and justice, but it very comes to mind now because especially now that there's this focus on systemic racism, and many people say like, well, you're an environmental organization, you shouldn't be just stick to protecting nature and focusing on climate change. And we're convinced that we cannot really face the climate crisis or solve everything that it's related to it, of course, availability of food being a very important one, unless we really also work on, with supremacy and systemic racism. And the connection is to have the idea, I mean, to have the climate crisis, you need these areas of or these zones and locations that you're able to sacrifice for the betterment of society. Like say you can extract oil or frack gas and pollute a whole watershed because you can sacrifice these areas. But it's impossible to sacrifice this area if you don't deem of the people there as disposable. And you cannot have a notion of disposable people unless you have an ideology of supremacy and racism. So this is very important, again, when you think of any environmental problem that we have, and especially also with food supply, because more that we have climate migration due to disasters, due to different economic circumstances, then you will have this shortage of food, these problems that are, again, what happens in one place will affect in another. So all of this is connected. So I think that right now, because my mind, the US and everybody is focusing so much on systemic racism, I wanted to address that. But I'll stop there so that we can hear from other people as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. Andrew, would you like to continue?
Sure, thank you. So thanks as well to all for having me here. So my name is Andrew Bell. I'm an assistant professor at New York University. And I came here, I guess, if I can talk about how I've come to care about the things I care about, it's sort of a history of misguided confidence, I suppose, that comes from youth, and particularly the privileged white male youth, just deciding I know what's best for the world and I'm gonna seize it. And I started off in engineering. I jumped into thinking I'm gonna fix the environment. I'm gonna build a thing that's gonna solve the problem. And I studied engineering for 7 or 8 years, and I hated it. And I realized I was so much more interested in the sort of like human environment interface, and thinking about where people need to make decisions and what it means for different people in different parts of the world to make decisions. And so I jumped ship. I did a terrible PhD dissertation looking at sort of the intersection of cattle ranching and deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. And I was lucky to jump out and take a job at the International Food Policy Research Institute, which is one of 15 different agricultural research centers under this umbrella called the CGIAR. And it was really exciting. I got to see a lot of different things. I worked for a while looking at decision-making in irrigation systems in Pakistan and Bangladesh. I spent a long time, and I've actually kept this through to today, looking at adoption problems of conservation agriculture and soil husbandry in Malawi, in Southern Africa, and spent some time as well looking at trying to sort of shift, the challenges of shifting away from pesticide-driven agriculture towards natural biocontrol approaches in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia and Vietnam. So I spent a lot of time in agriculture.
Andrew, can I interrupt you just a second? For some reason, your voice keeps coming in and out. So, and I'm having trouble hearing you. So,
oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm just wondering if others are having to. So maybe if we can raise your voice.
Sure. Oh, I can shout. But maybe what I'll do instead.
Oh, this is much better. This is much better.
No, is this better? I've just shifted microphones.
Yes, much better. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll stick like that, and I'll lean in a little bit. So anyway, I think I was just starting to get to say that as much as I thought originally that,
apparently in New York, this
as a thing that you have to do,
isn't so
if
good.
It wasn't your choice.
Andrew, we lost you for like, I don't know how many seconds, 20 seconds. So. Would you like to try it again? Can we hear you once again?
How about that? Is this better?
We hear you right now.
Okay. So sorry for the trouble. We're good. Can people hear me?
Yes, though your image is frozen.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Now everything is good. Now it's good.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Life with Zoom, right?
It's how it is. Well, sorry for that. So anyway, I won't waste too much more time. I'm not sure where this is coming from. Is this coming from me? Possibly. I'm so sorry. Okay. All right.
We're having fun.
So anyway, I got really much more into thinking that we ought to be better at thinking about what people's decision sets are, what their options are, and we know pretty well that the world of the future isn't going to have nearly as many people on small, tiny farms. We have a lot of evidence that sort of says that medium scale, family run, market integrated farming is a really good way to sort of balance risks to families as well as risks to the environment. But to get there, we need to do a much better job of thinking what everybody in the world is going to be doing. And so stepping further out and thinking about broader livelihood decision-making, including labor migration, climate-driven migration, is kind of where I am. So I build simulation models. I build agent-based models of individual decision makers making decisions about what they want to do and where they want to be. And I try to do the best job that I can of informing those, not just with assumptions that I have, but with data. We do experiments and surveys all around the world to try and get a better idea of what is shaping, what people's constraints are, what matters to them. And from that, looking forward to sort of what are the things we can expect at the system level in the future, given what sort of constraints people are facing. So just lastly, to kind of follow on what Ramon was saying, one of the things that I think we end up doing, for instance, when we put the environment first and don't think about development, is we end up discarding, half or more of the world's agency. And I think, until we bring ourselves to a place where, your opportunity to do a graduate degree or be a police officer or be an artist or be whatever you want to be, isn't shaped by where you were born, we're really in a lot of trouble. So kind of thinking through how we can kind of smooth out access to opportunity across the world is one of the first steps we've got to take if we want to sort of get climate under control. So I'll leave it there.
Defne?
Well, good evening. It's 10 p.m. where I am, so please forgive me if I cannot deliver properly. Last night when we were having the workshop, I warned you about my condition. After 7, I actually don't function. So most of the stuff I will be looking into my notes and reading from there. Please do take my apology. My name is Defne Koryürek, and I've been a cook, a butcher. I still am a mother. And I've been in the restaurant business, food business, almost like forever. Even the activism is related to food. I was the international counselor from Turkey to slow food for several years. And almost for 10 years, I led the convivium that I founded, which still is, I think, kind of famous with the campaigns it led. But after the Gezi Parkı, which you probably know as the Occupy Gezi, I realized most of the stuff that I've been dealing with, I've been working on, was just a Band-Aid. There is truly a need for a change, but not in the word change is not enough. It needs a bigger action. We need a bigger action. Statistics make more sense than common wisdom. So let me give you a couple of facts and figures to start with. Today, I'll be following your lead, Lydia. Today, while 1 out of 7 has to live with $1, and 1 out of 2 has only $10 a day, and 1 out of 9 do not get adequate nutrition, there is approximately $37 trillion in circulation, plus $1.2 quadrillion or more in the form of investments, derivatives, and cryptocurrencies globally. Money rules. We measure everything with it, every day, every moment. And while it seems extremely difficult for us to fully grasp the possibility of a life with less than $1 a day, we also cannot really comprehend what $37 trillion can achieve. If we were able to, we'd be most disgusted with ourselves. What an irony. It is not a matter of distribution. Our value system is corrupt. It is not a community-oriented. It is not a justice-oriented. It is only a profit-oriented system. Profit beats everything in our system. It is astonishing. It is a shame in monumental stature. And money neither gives us the courage nor the backing needed to cross this coming crisis. And the crisis on the way with its full potential for destruction. It is of our own making. Our crooked value system is the cause of it. If we are to come out alive, we will have to come up with a new value system, a system that will take into account only the natural community of plants, animals, and other organisms, and the physical environment in which they live and interact. What I propose is not just a change or a manageable alteration in the system, but a revolution, a shift in the paradigm that will transform our civilization. And food, the nutritious substance that we eat in order to maintain life, is an amazing catalyst and will become an excellent guide in this transition. If we put ourselves in direct proximity with the well-being of our planet, food will help us make connections. It will help us build communities. We'll become less of an individual. It will be easier to define what's enough and what's not. We'll reclaim the words like value and enough, like plenty and just. As we repair the water and restore the land, as it's a must, we'll reclaim the narrative. And we'll have to if we want to survive this coming storm. This is truly where I stand. I'm not interested in the Green Deal. I'm not interested in the managing of the next market crash and this and that. We truly have to build a new civilization, and I think the only way to deal with the coming crisis is there. And I'm with you, Ramon, when we're talking about our problems. We almost always forget that they are all interrelated. The women, the idea of the other, it's just like the ecology or the foods that are going to disappear or the seeds that we have lost already. They're all interrelated. So we just cannot take one piece, deal with that in one geography, in one certain area, and think that we have at least succeeded in dealing with this. No, it doesn't work that way. We'll have to deal with everything all at once. That means we'll have to rebuild the system. Livia, this is it. This is it for the moment. Thank you.
Maybe thank you, Defne. I'd like to maybe go to this very personal experience. Probably will add on what Defne was suggesting there. So this March, like everybody else, I was going through this, the experiencing the pandemic, but I was one of the first 50 patients in New York City who contracted the virus, unfortunately. So that was too early, and very early March. And around that time, this experience with everybody else and using computers, social media, being connected globally and globally everywhere at the same time, experiencing a pandemic in our deserted streets, etc. There was this time where our supermarket shelves were completely empty. They weren't empty because the export and import stopped. It was primarily empty because people were buying in an amount that they actually didn't need. So, for example, if you needed one box of painkiller for an entire family, people were buying boxes and boxes of them immediately as soon as they heard about this pandemic that is coming. So the shelves were empty. So by the time we had to stay in quarantine for about 5 weeks, actually, with my partner. We were both positive. And around that time, I had to learn how to bake. I had to learn a couple of things. But it was that time when we were completely out of food. Livia, my dear friend, came actually to my door. We didn't see each other, with a big box full of foods, organic, handmade, this and that. And it was a wonderful moment for me to realize like how easy to have that lack of the access, how that the access is broken, and then this moment of this personal help. But very soon after that, when the demonstrations broke because of the devastating killing of George Floyd, I was lucky enough to be immune. So I was on the streets every day, going to these protests. And there was something opposite going on, almost at the same time. There is 1 month difference between the two events that I'm talking about. The supermarket's empty, we don't know how to share, we don't think about anybody else, and we just, in a very greedy way, getting everything for ourselves. And in these demonstrations, something completely different was happening. People were offering each other food, and I don't know, water, hand sanitizers, etc. Everybody is extremely kind to each other, constantly cleaning around, this and that. And I had this experience before at the Gezi Park protest that Defne has just mentioned. So what I think is, it is not that those bad people did all these supermarket things or the lootings, and then the good people protested nicely and shared, etc. I think it's not about that. It's about an organized act. It is about how we can, it is a political attitude, actually, to behave in this way, and how contagious it is, this sort of behavior. The very greedy act, or like not being thoughtful, is also contagious, but this moment of learning how to behave in that sort of crowd is also a political act. Or me thinking about, okay, I learned how to bake all these breads, it's great, but how about bringing to my elderly neighbors? This is a political act, and this could only be done in an organized way. I could not find the elderly people around my community, so I had to I had to introduce myself to some other communities, get organized, and then be able to serve for it. And none of this was because I was a good person. It was a political act, and political act can only be realized in an organized action, I would think. So I do agree with that, Defne, that this change is necessary, and the collective change can only happen, I think, when we are convincing one another about it. And we see that how wrong it can go and how actually good it can go right in the same geography. And one more thing, while we were experiencing the pandemic globally, we were also experiencing all these demonstrations globally. So what was happening here was happening everywhere else in the same attitude. So I truly believe that these kind of actions can drastically be changed just through an organized activity. Yes, Defne?
I actually see it as reclaiming the narrative rather than it's being a political act. I mean, what we experienced in Gezi, I bet New Yorkers experienced a similar thing in Wall Street at the park. For a brief period in time, we were able to write the history ourselves without the markets, without the governments, without the institutions. We decided to build a small hospital in the Gezi Park. We decided to build a small kitchen in the Gezi Park. And we decided how the relations was going to happen between the people while they were using those facilities. There was no money in the Gezi Park. That was a decision made by us. That was our narrative. So I think we really need to reclaim this position again, instead of us being told what's right and what's wrong, instead of us being disciplined in this civilized system, civilized quote unquote, I think we really need to come up with a new terminology, a new style, a new fashion of dealing with these things. We have to reclaim our words. Sustainability even is not our word anymore. Good is not a word for that we can use now. It's all taken from us. We have to reclaim them. I think it is an urgent, immediate thing that we need to be talking about.
I actually would like to throw this question to Andrew because of his work. Because one of the things that I know that we have discussed in the past is this question of agency and I know you've been doing a lot of work about decision making. And one of the things that I think is at stake is what choices are available and to whom is at the core of it, right? It's like the decision that I can make as an individual is going to be very different from a farmer who's trying to put food on the table. So I'm just kind of curious, what is your take on these kind of questions?
Yeah, I guess I'll say a couple of things. One is that, so yes, many of us all over the world experienced a number of things over the last 8 months. We experienced the scare through March, April of, or we're going to run out of this, or we're going to run out of that, and how do we know if we're going to get these things that we need? And that's something that we're certainly in New York we're not used to. That we trust our supply chains and we never have to think about it. And then right through May and June, and I mean, I guess even through to today, we have the experience of participating in these sort of protests for racial justice in New York, and I'm sure in other places across the world. Of course, I haven't left New York now in 10 months. I don't know, but what's striking about these protests, and it's wonderful to see how broad the participation is. It's so exciting and so important. But one of the things that I feel has to be said is that it's a little bit different. I feel like many of us participating in these protests aren't at risk in the same way as other people. And certainly the risks that we face by participating in these protests are not the same as the risks that we perceived when we were worried about interruptions to our food supply or our cleaning supplies or whichever it was. And so I think, I guess the thread that I see across this is we have this opportunity to have the experience, which we don't often get for many of us relatively privileged people, of what it's like to be scared and what it's like to be uncertain about the things that you have access to. I mean, across New York, for those who aren't here, we have one borough where I live that has been almost completely safe from the beginning. It's never been a hotspot of any kind of disease or scare. but many people work here who have to who had to travel, you know, on crowded subways and across spaces, and, you know, living in density, like not having the opportunity to protect themselves and isolate themselves in the same way that we did. And it's very divided across the city to the extent that there's almost a, you know, sort of a wage earning versus mortality trade-off that many people across America face. So I guess I don't want to ramble too much, but I kind of just want to put that pin in what we're speaking about, is that we've had this opportunity over the last year to experience this uncertainty and this, you know, this risk that we don't often do.
Because we're talking about food production and food security and food insecurity, my question, and it's a question for, you know, Ramon, for Defne, to all of you, you know, this idea that, Andrew, I'm so grateful to you for bringing up, of risk, right? And how the question of agency, to what extent do we have, you know, the agency to make decisions vis-a-vis the risks we have to take in different parts of the world, in different social stratas, across different skin colors, etc. Can we, you know, we spoke also about this question of scale. Does a small farmer face the same challenges and risks as the big agro farm that needs to make decisions about what seeds to sow so they can deal with droughts? So I'm taking us back to this question of food. And obviously everything is interrelated, right? So Ramon, do you have anything to say on that?
Sure. I mean, I think, you know, if when you talk about, I mean, of course, it depends. You mentioned the scales. I know that it really depends, you know, at what scale we're talking about. Because when it comes to agency and, like, you know, the ability for us to be able to sort of like take command or take charge of our world, our society, etc. Of course, you know, we're right now in a moment in history where it probably has been the easiest, in, you know, and most independent, especially with social media and with technology, and how easy it would be for a small farmer to communicate with you know, across the world, and develop customers, etc. At the same time, it's sort of like the most difficult to, especially to break through to, you know, when you have this agglomeration of power in a specific, you know, places and corners. You know, we see it, for example, with information, no? Like, it has been the moment in history where it's the easiest to access all kinds of information. Still, you know, the information that gets particularly to us is so limited. No, we saw it right now, you know, when it comes to, you know, to the elections. How come 75 million people supported Donald Trump? You know, it blows my mind. You know, still, you have that people are, because of their relationships, their friendships, their channels, the news channels, etc. They're like, you know, siloed into these ways of not being able to access any information that it sort of like have helped that brainwashing. And so when it comes to food and to consumption, it is also similar, no? Like, we have, and especially, you know, for us that live in a society or in a place that it's in general, you know, more access to food and choices, etc. You know, I can access like local food that it's coming from other places, but for so many others it does not. And again, I mean, it's so it is a big challenge. And not that I'm like offering here any opportunities. It's just but you know, and hopefully in the audience and here we can talk about ways of making it in a way that ultimately what we want is that local economies can be thriving, that people can have you know, dignified like standards of living and access to sustainable, livable wages and jobs. And so all that, you know, it's in theory it should be easy, and it's still like so difficult, especially of course now in the crisis that we're going through. That it's another topic that I mean I could answer that question under that lens, but I'll stop there and to allow others to also respond.